Today we're going to be talking about ROI attribution, but before we get started, I want to take a second to talk about what that actually means. So ROI stands for return on investment. And investment is kind of a funny word because there's a lot of ambiguity in what the investment is. Is the investment simply your ad spend? Or is it the ad spend plus your agency costs? Is it ad spend plus agency costs plus internal marketing team salaries? These are the questions that you really need to start asking yourself before you can really make sense of what's happening with your marketing dollars. Today we're going to be talking about ROI attribution, but before we get started, I want to talk a little bit about what that actually means. So investment can be very ambiguous. What is your actual investment when it comes to marketing? Is it simply your ad spend? Is it ad spend plus agency costs? Is it ad spend plus agency costs plus internal costs? It's going to be different for every company because every company has a different business model. But these are the questions that you really need to start asking yourselves before you can try to establish any kind of attribution model. Now, attribution, what does that mean? So every company has active marketing and sales efforts. So when a sale comes through and you start to see revenue numbers, how are you attributing that revenue to all of the different marketing and sales activity that's going on in your organization? So what we're going to cover today when it comes to ROI attribution are, first I want to talk about channel success. With all the different marketing efforts and all the different channels, you have to understand how to effectively measure the success within those individual channels. Then we can talk more about data aggregation. So you have all this data in all these different channels. How do you bring that together to start to make a story with the data? And then developing a marketing plan. So, I work with clients all the time that don't have a marketing plan in place before they start spending money, which is always going to be less successful than if you go in with a plan. And then finally, we'll get into the good stuff, which is how to actually build an attribution model. All right, so let's start at the beginning. And what I mean by the beginning is let's take a look at what the individual channels are doing. So you have to begin with those basic building blocks that will tell you what's happening in each of those channels. So first, let's talk about your website data. What are you looking at when you log into Google Analytics? You're looking at things like, where is my traffic coming from? How many new visitors do I have? What products or services are they looking at? All of that stuff is really important to know if you want to measure the success of your website. All right, now what about email? So the things that you look at when you're running email campaigns are how many emails are being sent? How many people are opening those emails? Are they clicking through to the website? Are they unsubscribing? Right? All of those metrics kind of work together to tell you whether or not your email campaigns are successful. Right? Now we get to social media. The things that are important on social media, likes, comments, shares, followers. This is all stuff that's really important within those platforms because they're sending signals to whatever you're using that people are enjoying your content, which in turn increases the probability that it will be shown to more people. What about paid search? So if you're spending money on search ads, the things that you're looking at are cost per click, conversion rate, what's the click-through rate, what's the cost per conversion, and then display, how many impressions am I getting, how much is it costing me per 1,000 impressions, and what's the click-through rate there. And then we get into traditional media. So traditional media is things like television, radio, billboard, things like that. Maybe after you put up a new billboard, you can go look in Google search trends to see if there was a lift in searches for your brand. Let's shift for a minute from our marketing efforts to our sales efforts. Oftentimes, I run into companies that we're working with where the marketing department is kept completely separate from the sales department. And I challenge you to change that mindset and at least come together through sales and marketing and decide on what those common goals are and what those KPIs are. Put together a lead scoring system that will help you determine how effective your marketing is before you hand it off to sales. And when you're looking at sales data, it's not just about revenue. It's about how valuable a sale is for your company long term. What's the lifetime value of your customer? What's the return rate of your customers? How much are they really contributing to your overall goals? And how many long-term clients do you have? All right, so now we have a better understanding of all of the different channels and all the different metrics that we're looking at in those channels, some important metrics that we really need to pay attention to. Cool. Neat. Who cares? Seriously, who cares? If you're the director of marketing, or maybe you're part of a marketing team, what does a report about cost per click from paid search, or the number of likes on Facebook, or the number of emails opened, what does that actually mean to your business goals? It means nothing. I want to know, after somebody opens that email and goes to your website, then how many sales do you have? That's what's important to me. So I don't want you to think that everything that we just went over is not important. It is. It's very important to understand how each of the channels works and how to measure success within them. But what you need to start thinking about is how can I bring all of that information together that makes sense as a whole and ties back to the success of the business. As the different marketing channels continue to expand within your organization, you have to have a plan in place that will start to connect all the different touch points. Whether you use data aggregation platform or you have internal teams of analysts, it's vital to bring everything together into one central location where all of your efforts can be viewed as a whole. So the very first step in data aggregation is the determination of goals. I can't stress to you how important this is, and surprisingly, it's the step most companies fail to take. If you don't know what your goals are, how will you ever measure success? What is it that you're trying to do? Are you trying to get your name out there? Are you trying to get more people to sign up for something? Are you trying to get more people to call you? What are you trying to do? All right, so now that you know what your goals are, how are you going to measure them? Well, you got to start at the beginning. Every company has data. It's only a matter of finding it. So start looking. And then start asking yourself some questions like, who's in charge of managing that data? How are they keeping track of it? How do you know that what you're looking at is accurate? Where are those checks and balances to make sure that the data that you have is reliable? People need to be accountable for that activity. So who are you reporting to? About what? What are you reporting? Is it meaningful? Once you start asking these questions and discovering the data, you'll end up with a pile of puzzle pieces that you'll need to start thinking about how they fit together. You're not going to see the big picture if you don't have the pieces in place first. So as you have all of these gathered puzzle pieces, you have to start thinking about who it is that is involved in these processes. You have, people within your sales and operations and marketing teams, and then you have, of course, all of your data platforms, and you need to bring all of that information into one central location. And we call that data governance. So what is data governance? It's one of those buzzwords that you hear a lot these days, but really what is it? When it comes to marketing and sales, it is a business process that takes place where all of the different success metrics and KPIs from all of the different touch points in a customer's journey is brought together into a central location for a single output. So the management of data points across disciplines and channels to one single repository that looks at KPIs and looks at goals under one umbrella. So you might ask yourself, well, how that could be possible? Well, again, you have to start by asking yourself some questions. Think about, what is an impression? Is it an impression when somebody sees your ad? What if your ad is animated? Do they have to see the whole thing for it to be an impression? Is it an impression when your email lands in somebody's inbox? Or is it only an impression when they open it? Reach is another one. What the heck is reach? How is reach different from impressions? Engagement. This one gets thrown around a lot. Do you know what engagement means? It means so many different things to different people that its purpose as a KPI becomes null. I guess the point I'm trying to make here is that if you don't know the answers to these questions, then you'll never have any hope of building an ROI attribution model. You have to start by bridging the gap. Bridges won't work if they're not connected. So you all have a set of different channels with all these different metrics, and you can start to draw parallels between them. You can start to make sense of everything as a whole. Now, the connections you make across those channels might be different than the ones that I make. it depends on your business and your audience behavior. Those need to be taken into account when you start going through this process. So now that there's a clear understanding of the business goals, the next step is to put a plan together. If you don't have a plan in place, I can tell you right now, you won't be successful. A plan with a goal will always be more successful. So the first part of the plan is the budget. Believe it or not, we come across businesses all the time who don't actually have a marketing budget. If you don't know what you're working with, how will you ever measure success? So channel selection is another part of the process. And you won't know out of the gate which channels are going to be the most effective. You might have some guesses, but the hard truth is that if you won't know if something will work until you try it. Which channels you're using is largely dependent not only on your budget, but also on your overall goals. And it's not easy when you're first starting out. But if you figure out how you're going to manage the different channels, then it might start to help you narrow that down. Again, think about who's going to be responsible for ensuring that those channels are effective. Go back to the top-down approach. What are the goals? How are they being measured? And then think about how you're making connections across the different channels. And that might help you discover which channels are going to be the best for you. So what messages are we sending to people throughout their journey with our brand? All right, so let's take a breath. I've given you a lot to think about up to this point, and it's important that you understand how important it is to establish a plan, how important it is to set goals and decide on what success metrics are. All of that needs to be done before you can get to the good stuff. It's not easy. It takes a lot of time, but it's necessary if you're going to move into true attribution. So, attribution. Good things come to those who wait. You've probably all seen this before, right? This is your typical marketing funnel where customers move through from brand awareness to consideration, all the way through to decision, right? You've all seen this. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what's really going on here. So within the awareness phase of your funnel, you're utilizing several different channels and different types of content. Maybe you have a video out there talking about fun facts. Perhaps there's a blog post you're promoting about how to succeed in your industry. And as people start to move through the funnel, you're giving them more and more personalized messages, messages that pertain to their business and are more relevant to the individual. You're giving them the incentive to want to do business with you or buy your products. Now let me tell you what usually doesn't happen. Usually, you're not going to see something like this. You're not going to have someone discover your brand for the first time and immediately make a purchase. At least not typically. Sometimes it happens, but as a general rule, that's not how people shop. If you're B2B, it's also not how someone decides to do business with you. And in fact, a customer journey looks usually something more like this, where the user kind of bounces around in that awareness consideration phase until they get something really interesting from you, right? They get something interesting and relevant from you, and then they start to get closer and closer to that decision. So why is this important? It's important to know what the customer journey is in order to start to understand your audience's behavior, because that's the only way you'll be able to start attributing credit for all of the different touch points. Let me take you back to last quarter's Lunch and Learn. So if you remember, Jason talked about how he became a customer of the clothing brand Bonobos. Here's a little reminder of that story. So he was on Facebook, and he came across a promoted post about 3 tie knots every man should know. At that point in time, Jason was actually looking to learn more tie knots, so he followed the link to learn more. And while he was there, he liked the look of the brand and thought, let me go check these guys out. So he starts browsing the website, and he thinks, hey, I like these clothes. Next time I'm going to look into buying something, maybe I'll see if they have what I'm looking for. A couple of days later, he gets retargeted with an ad that says 10% off your first purchase, and he thinks, yeah, okay, let's try this out. And he goes to make a purchase. Now, what we often run into when we're working with clients is what we call last click attribution. Last click attribution is the idea that the very last touch point a person has before purchasing gets the credit for that sale. So you're telling me that within this customer journey, it was the 10% off coupon that did all the work? I don't think so. let's talk about what actually happened here. You have this guy, Jason, who fits your demographic, mid to late 20s, appreciates fashion, and you target him with a piece of content that happened to be something he was interested in, learning to tie more tie knots. He reads the article, then he goes to the website, then he gets retargeted with an ad, and then he makes a purchase. So while that 10% off coupon may have pushed him into the decision in that moment, it never would have happened if all the other stuff didn't happen first. In reality, the majority of the weight for this customer journey belongs at the beginning. If he hadn't seen that article, he wouldn't have even known that the Bonobos brand existed. If he had gone to the website and had a bad experience there, the chances of him buying would be reduced. And yeah, the coupon gave him the incentive he needed to finally purchase, but that purchase probably would have happened anyway. The coupon maybe just sped up the process. So you might be thinking to yourself, okay, easy. Obviously, the most weight belongs to whatever caused someone to discover my brand, but that isn't always the case. Let's think of another scenario. Say you're a business owner, and as a business owner, you've been working with a certain bank for a couple of years, and they decide to change their business model, so your rates go up, and you start to think about maybe I should switch banks. You happen to know about a local bank that is known for working well with various businesses. Maybe you've met other business owners who bank with them, or you've seen a television ad on your local news station. Maybe you were reading an article online and saw an ad for the bank. The point is that there's already a level of brand awareness for this bank. So as you start thinking about the possibility of switching, you visit the bank's blog and you read something interesting. And then maybe a couple weeks later, you return to the blog and read another interesting post. And after reading that, you decide, you know what, these guys produce really great content, so I'm going to sign up through their email so that I can get all of their blog posts. And in doing so, you provide additional information to the bank about being a business owner in the area, and a couple weeks go by, and then you get a personalized email about how switching banks can be easy, even for business owners. And guess what? It does seem really easy. And since you're really not happy with your current bank, you go ahead and you find the nearest branch to talk to somebody. After talking with the rep, you learn about some great new services they have for business owners, and you make the decision to switch. Now, in this scenario, I would actually put the majority of the weight closer to that decision point. Don't get me wrong, the brand recognition is important too, but what pushed this business owner over the edge was this very relevant piece of content further down the funnel. Now, we're not going to know every individual story, nor would it be practical to sit down and map out every individual story to come up with an attribution model. So what we have to do instead is we have to rely on the data to tell us the story. Rely on the data to show you where your customers are coming from and what types of content, at what points in their journey, are tipping people over into that decision. So let me walk you through how you would start to do that. All right, so let's go back to the marketing funnel real quick. You have all these different touch points with all these different types of content and different messaging. Now, running concurrently within that marketing funnel, you have what we call a conversion funnel. So within each level of the funnel, you have different types of metrics that are giving you different levels of success. And as you progress through the marketing funnel, you also progress through the conversion funnel. And as you get further and further along that conversion funnel, the quality of that lead gets warmer until you get to the bottom and you have a truly viable interest in your products and services. So this is the first step in the weighting process. You know as a business that meeting someone in person is going to be more effective than if somebody just goes to your website to request a quote. You know that when somebody actively contacts you for information, it's because they're closer to purchasing than, say, a person who signs up for your email list. You can start to assign different weight to the different metrics you're tracking. But we're not done yet. So you have all these different channels that you're working in, and then within the channels you have all these different types of content and all these different metrics that you with varying levels of importance and varying weights. What you need to do next is start following the different patterns of behavior that are bringing people to interact with your brand. With the proper tracking in place, you can start to see those patterns and create that customer journey map. And eventually you'll end up with something that looks a little more like this. So after doing all that work and setting up all that data, you can start to see a true high-level view of all the different touch points and how they contribute to your overall revenue. Let me talk for a minute about a common misconception. Some businesses think that once they get to this point, they will have solved the puzzle, and now they know what the most effective channel is. Email, right? So then they decide, okay, since that's the most effective channel, they're going to put all of their time and energy into that email channel. Now, if you do that, you may see some short-term lift in revenue, but single-channel marketing is not something that's sustainable over time. And what you'll start to see is that your email channel can't support the level of revenue you're used to on its own. You need to have all the different touch points in order to sustain a healthy revenue stream. So really what you should be thinking about when you're looking at your attribution model is, okay, so now that I know once I get people into my email list, they have a good chance of converting, what if I shift some money around to do a social media campaign? And since we have all our tracking in place across the various channels, we'll start to see what impact that social campaign has across the board, whether it impacted what I'm doing in all the other channels. So maybe you'll see an increase in email signups, maybe you'll notice a lift in organic traffic. Whatever the case may be, you'll certainly start to see what that impact is on your overall revenue. All right, I'm going to leave you today with a story about spiders. Spiders are neat. A while back, I read an article about how spiders can actually tune the different parts of their web to have different frequencies so they know what's happening and where. When I was thinking about the modern landscape of marketing, it kind of reminded me of that little factoid, and I thought how marketing is this really complex web of messaging, where you have multiple channels, multiple touch points, where you're helping to guide users to get to a goal. The various channels will have different tones and messaging depending on where someone is in that funnel. And when you're talking about attribution, understanding those customer journeys is a key component. Thanks for watching, everyone. ROI attribution is not simple. It takes a lot of planning and analysis, and it's not something that's going to happen overnight. As always, Liquid is here to help should you need it.